மறக்காம சர்ப்ரைஸ் பண்ணுங்க. Thank you.
A very important reason for sacrifice in the endgame is to gain passed pawns. As we know, the endgame is all about passed pawns, and often the objective changes from the immediate attempt to checkmate the opponent's king, which is typical of the middle game, to the attempt to create and queen passed pawns. To illustrate this, we'll see a game I played some years ago against international master Leonid Gerjoy, where I had the black pieces, and this game was from Philadelphia 2009. And I've just taken back on d5, and now my opponent traded queens. Queen takes d5. The alternatives are not that great, so reaches this position where I'm placing my hopes in my light square, in my two bishops. My hopes of winning the game, that is. However, it's not so easy because the pawn structure is symmetrical otherwise on the two sides of the board and the center. The white knight has various support points, so it's not a terrible piece. And white has some lead in development after the move bishop f4, so I'll need to neutralize his play on the c-file. Bishop f4, I played bishop f5, rook a to c1. Now it was important to get the move order just right in order to get some sort of chance of winning the game. If I just castle, then rook c7, and his rook is very powerful, and then it's if f6, for instance, he can go in knight d7, and then rook to f7, knight to b6, and this is not good for black. The d-pawn is too weak. So it was important first to play f6 and drive the knight back. Now it can't go to d7, so it goes to f3, and now I castle. And here I want to keep two bishops, and probably ideal would be one pair of rooks in order to have the best position. The two pair of rooks can be a problem sometimes because white would have counterplay, and no rooks, as we see in the game, is difficult for black to win, but one pair of rooks would be ideal. However, I can't really do that. In order to prevent me from just blocking the c-file, he played rook c7. So I played g5 first. I played this move. Okay, I can also start with rook f7. I don't think there was a big difference, but this is coming into my plans because I want to have potential retreat for my bishop and just to gain space on the king side. I'm never going to play f5 anyway, so I'll have to find other ways of activating my dark square bishop. Bishop d6, rook f7. So I challenge his rook on the 7th rank. Now rook to c1. And it was important that I had calculated in advance, actually. I remember long before, when I first went into the endgame, around when I was playing bishop f5, let's say, to have calculated a position like this and seen that he can't keep a rook on the 7th rank, because if he could, after rook c7, I could even be worse. My two bishops wouldn't be enough to counterbalance his very strong rook on c7, and his knight will find some good squares eventually. But here I have important resource, rook c8, which was prepared in the previous moves. And he has to exchange the rook from c7, so he can't keep that rook on the 7th rank. And then what awaits white after the exchange of rooks, which is forced, otherwise rook c1. He could go rook e7, but after rook e7, black has bishop f8. Also rook c1, but bishop f8 even stronger, winning immediately. So after the exchange of rooks, what awaits white is just pure defense, because there's no reason white could have a pretension to an advantage here. Only black has something to play for. The two bishops are very valuable, but it's not easy at all. In a position with a locked center and symmetrical majorities, neither side having a majority, it's very difficult to win. You have to consistently put pressure on different points and find every resource to break through. Nevertheless, white has no positive plan and can really only just try to defend. So he went knight to d2. The knight on f3 wasn't doing anything, so he sent it to the queen's side. And not to d3, because on d3, like if he went knight e1, planning to go to d3, then bishop would control that square. Bishop f5. So knight to d2 he played. Also, he's preparing to bring his king into the game, moving the f-pawn forward, making an outlet for his king, and trading a pair of pawns, which is always good when you're defending in minor piece endings, trying to trade pawns. King f7. As we know, bringing the king in is very important in the ending. One of the most important things you learn about the ending. So knight b3 he played, king e6, bishop b8. He wants to keep c5 for his knight, so he doesn't occupy that square. In any case, I would nevertheless bring my king up towards c6 and play b6 to drive it away. Here I played king d7, so there's no way in for my king through the king side, so I'm bringing it over to c6, where it can potentially go b5 to c4, or even to a4 as we saw later, but it's prepared for action on the queen side. So here my opponent played f4, trying to trade pawns, and he wants also, he obtains the e5 square for his bishop. So here I don't think I recognized it then, and I don't remember when I looked at the game. Right, I'm not sure why here I didn't put some attention to this point, because I just played king c6, allowing him, well, and he didn't even take the opportunity immediately, but the next move to take on g5, which is what happened in the game. And this gives him a lot more hope, I think, because his bishop can be anchored on e5. And I'm surprised, I think basically I just didn't like the alternative h6, the obvious move to take back with the h-pawn, because sometime in the future he might be able to go g3 and h4. And such a passed pawn is not exactly frightening, but it could divert my pieces and it could cause me some problems. I think even this might have been better than what I played, but I'm not sure, because, well, it at least makes it more problems for white. I don't think the passed pawn that he can create would be very big deal, but also maybe even better was g4, and I might not have considered this move just because it looks a little bit unaesthetic. It creates some holes in black's king side, but there's no way for white really to use them. It gains important space, and it leaves e5 square in black's control, and a bishop even a little bit stranded, you can say. f5 move would not be possible because this pawn will fall immediately here. It goes king c6, and I take the pawn. So this also leaves black with a route potentially into white's position via the light squares. Oops. And it cramps the white king side, so either g2, or if he pushes the pawn to g3, then the whole pawn chain could be vulnerable. I'm not sure why I didn't play this move. I think I just considered that the pawn might become weak on g4, and maybe he can attack it with king g3, but the problem is that then black will gain the initiative on the queen side much more quickly than white could try to attack that pawn. White needs the king on the queen side, so this was much better, I think. But I played king c6. He played king f2, and really he should have taken the opportunity to take on g5 immediately, because this gave me another opportunity for g4. But again, I didn't want that pawn structure for some reason, and I played b6. Controlling his knight. This is part of my plans, but more important was to fix the king side first. But here he took on g5, which was the right decision. I took back. And now bishop e5. So he's able to anchor his bishop on a square where it's secure, defends d4, and basically helps him to have this solid central formation, which I can really not attack so easily. And I can't take his bishop, because if I take, or at least it's not very good to, he takes back, and now he's ready to go knight to d4, and he can control the square also with king e3. So I'm in danger of being worse here. After the exchange of minor pieces, there's a chance I can get into a blockading knight type. If I make another bad move, like a5, let's say, then he gets knight to d4, blockading, and king to e3, and suddenly I'm in a situation where my remaining bishop is much worse than his knight. He has this passed e-pawn. White has all the chances to win. A5, of course, not good, but black needs to play d4, opening the d5 square for his king. Important idea. You need open lines when you have a bishop, and sometimes this is a temporary sacrifice. Nevertheless, this is not as good, because here, after these forced moves, now black can probably take on e5, or maybe h6, knight f7, h5, and then eventually bishop e6, but e3, bishop e6. But all of this leads to drawish positions in different ways. So it's not as best. Of course, I don't want to exchange the bishops. So I played bishop f8. Now came a period of some maneuvers as I looked for a way to make progress, made little threats, which kept my opponent on his toes as we approached the time control, but didn't really make any progress. So that's fine. It's good when you have the advantage to... And black still does have the advantage. The bishop on e5 may be well placed and anchored at least, but still white's knight is not very good. The two bishops are still a force. I have the king side solidly defended, all these squares, so there's no counterplay on the king side. And I have some chances on the queen side with pushing a pawn, bringing the king up, bishop f5 to b1, different kinds of things. In the long term, the bishops are still a force to be reckoned with. And so I maneuvered for a while. And as I was saying, when you have the advantage, it's a good idea to do this because it can induce errors from your opponent, and it can tire them out, and it's just a kind of a cat and mouse game. So I played bishop e7. Okay, this was important to stop bishop f6. I didn't want to allow this move forcing my pawn onto g4, and now that his king can come potentially to f4. He went knight to d2, and I went bishop f5. He went a3. So he's setting up his kingside formation, because otherwise I would invade somewhere on c4 and then b3. So he needs his knight on d2, and he will need the pawn on a3 eventually, because I'll eventually have to be able to force it there, or I'll play bishop b4. Here I played bishop d8, protecting my b6 pawn in advance, bishop g3, king b5, bishop d6, king a4. So I've got my king to a4, but still no clear way through. He has a blockade, and he moves his bishop back and forth. So now came a few repetitions, as I just wanted to make the time control at move 40. I played h5 here. Okay, first. I'm not sure if probably should have waited and maneuvered some more, but this comes into black's plans. So I played h5, bishop e5. Now came some repetitions, as I just wanted to get to move 40. And here, finally, I started to act, and I played a5. So, important thing is, with his bishop on d6, by the way, he can play b3, but now this loosens his pawns a little bit more, and I play king b5. And now he has to watch for bishop c2, which will keep his knight tied down, and then in some ways I can attack his knight, like g4 and bishop g5. He also has to watch for bishop e7, forcing the pawn to a4, and then creating new holes for my king then to enter with more effect. So he can come into zugzwang, where his bishop needs to stay on d6 to stop both bishop e7 and bishop c7. And so it becomes a danger of zugzwang. So that could happen at different points, but he didn't do it. Bishop e5. So finally I played a5 here. And I wanted to wait until his bishop was on not on d6, because then he could play b3. For instance, if I played it at the wrong moment, let's say here, then he might really be able to seal things up with b3, king b5, a4, king c6, and bishop, let's say, a3. And I think that there's no... Well, there's still chances, of course, but I didn't want to allow this kind of thing. If he's going to play a4, I wanted to at least be able to put my king on a5 then, where I still can break through then. So this is what happened, and bishop, he can't, unfortunately, he has no waiting moves for himself here. So he left diagonal with bishop e5, and now I went a5. So now b3 I take a pawn. After bishop d6 I played bishop c2, stopping b3. And now, in principle I could always do this, put a bishop on c2 and then play a5. He played bishop e5, and the problem here actually, so now we maneuver a little bit more. But the problem again is he doesn't want to go with bishop f8 because bishop c7. It was a defense worth considering, is to try just to allow this, but this gives black even more ground. So that's threatening h2. If h3, then I get f4 square, bishop f4 perhaps, or at some point I can use the f4 square. If g3, then his pawns are more vulnerable, and there's the danger of h4 breaking through in this way. So he didn't want to allow that, so he played bishop e5, bishop e7, bishop c7, b5, and here was a key point, and he made, I think, an error, and I was finally able to carry out the sacrifice I'd been angling for a long time. But I needed to get everything in the right position for it, and finally it all came together after this move. So his problem, though, now is that he's running low on moves again. So considering that he didn't want to allow the bishop to d6, so he should keep his bishop attacking a5, which would prevent me from sacrificing, and play some move like h3. And here I can try waiting, but a problem is that, let's say bishop f8, he has bishop d8, so I can't wait this way. Bishop d1 allows king d3, and so it becomes a little bit hard to wait effectively, and this is why maybe in the times before move 40 I could have delayed the push of my h-pawn, in which case I would have a spare move here. But this is just incredibly hard stuff to, of course, it's very tricky stuff to figure out, especially when you're low on time. So, in fact, here I still have good winning chances, though. In fact, it may be even just fine progression of the advantage to just play b4. I don't think I wanted to do it at the time because it leads to some more simplification, but as it turns out, the two bishops are still very powerful. So he has to take, king takes, and now here's black's plan is bishop b6, a4. And white again has to just wait. And remember, the knight can never move from d2 because king b3, take a pawn. The king can go to e2 in some cases, but this black does the same thing. So if bishop c7, no, king b5, let's say bishop e5, it's the same after other moves. I put bishop b4. And remarkably enough, there's no defense, effective defense really, to bishop c3, which shows how bad knights are at covering pawns on the side of the board. So bishop c7, bishop c3, and black will just win, because if b takes c3, a3, and the pawn is unstoppable. And otherwise black takes the pawn on b2 and also is unstoppable. It doesn't matter where white's bishop moves or what else white does here. There didn't seem to be any defense to bishop c3. Knight f3, bishop c3 as well. bc, a3, and if king d2, a2. If knight e1, then the thematic bishop to e4, controlling the knight. So this is a typical method, though, this sacrifice to divert the b pawn and promote the a pawn. I've had it in another game on the board as well. So he instead played bishop e5, though, and I think a similar plan was possible, actually, but it's not so clear because, well, yeah. It was even possible here, probably, to play b4, followed by a4, king b5, bishop b4, bishop c3. But even stronger was bishop takes a3, the sacrifice of the piece for 2 pawns. And it may not look not so easy to evaluate from the outset, but simplifying it can see, just to look at different ways white can stop the pawns, and it turns out there's really no way he can do it. B takes a3 is forced, king takes a3, and now he played g3. There's no advice I can give. He can try to move his knight. It looks logical to play knight f3, so his king can go to b2, or to d2, and his knight maybe counterattacks my king side, but it's also too slow. King b2, knight g5. It doesn't make a difference if king to d2. It will be same thing. a4. Always if knight e1, I have bishop e4, and the knight is controlled by the bishop. After a4, bishop d6, and the bishop, black bishop, just goes away somewhere. To f5, g6, wherever. And next comes a3. And let's say, for instance, this position takes, a3 he has to take, king takes, and the second pawn can't be stopped. So it's despite material equality, the second pawn still can't be stopped. So also if knight f3, king b2, if he takes immediately on g5, then a4. This is the same thing. Bishop d6, a3 takes, king takes, same result. And the b pawn is just not can't be stopped, really. King d2, again bishop f5, and we transpose to what we just saw, and the ineffectiveness of a knight in stopping past pawns is really clear here. So for instance, knight f7, b4, knight e6, we can even play b3. The bishop is taking this knight by b2. Knight b5, then black simply plays king b4. Knight c3, b2. And, well, after knight c3, it's not even best to play b2 because white gets to take the pawn and come back, but king c4 is even stronger. Still no way. You can play knight to d1, king takes d4, but this is also easily winning for black. The knight will be tied to b2, while black will advance the d pawn and also will attack the pawns on the king side. And black will win easily. But of course, also possible this and knight e5, king here, knight there, king takes, and white won't succeed in exchanging off the king side pawns. Black will win the knight and will manage to keep his h pawn alive. And it's the right color for the bishop, which is important. Okay, so these kind of variations show that there was no chance for white. He played g3, I'm not sure why, but I can't give there's no advice to be given white here. And after king b2, he played bishop d6, b4. In this case, I started pushing this pawn first, which is also fine. Knight f3, king c3. So this was also another plan if white played slower like this. Knight takes g5, a4. Knight e6, he tried to bring his knight back, a3. knight f4. There's no way to stop a3, a2, and a1. Knight f4, a2, knight e5 check. He got another check in, but king b3. Knight b4. While the knight is making all these maneuvers, black is just queening the pawn, and the game finished up like this. And he didn't resign immediately. Probably we were low on time a little bit, but now white resigned. So here, yes, the sacrifice of material for the creation of a passed pawn or multiple passed pawns is a very important principle to be using in the endgame.
மறக்காம சர்ப்ரைஸ் பண்ணுங்க. தேங்க்யூ.